The advancement of AI, or artificial intelligence, has certainly made everyday tasks more efficient, more productive, and you can certainly make the argument that it's a time saver and is part of the wave of the future. A survey conducted by the Pew Research Center found that 55% of Americans said that they use or interact with AI daily. Meanwhile, 44% said that they're still getting used to AI and are hesitant to use it on a daily or regular basis. However, where we've seen it most prevalently used is in the field of education by both educators and the students they're in charge of leading. According to CNBC, when it comes to the usage of AI, a similar spike occurred between teachers and students alike, with 46% of teachers and 48% of students saying that they use ChatGPT or other forms of AI at least weekly to help them with writing or communication tasks. And when it comes to students, that 48% number is a 27-point hike than this time a year ago. More broadly, the reviews from students seem to be more broadly positive, with 70% of K-12 students having a more favorable view of AI chatbots or AI in general. Among undergraduate students, the percentage rises to 75%, and their parents have a favorable view of AI chatbots and other forms of AI at a rate of 68%. This is good news, my friends, for my friend Cristian Perry. He's the CEO and co-founder of a startup called Undetectable AI. It's the ultimate solution for anyone who wants to use AI-generated text without being flagged by AI detectors, such as GPT-0, and under the platform, you can rest assured that every AI detector will detect your writing as human-driven. Under Perry's leadership, the platform has over 14 million users worldwide. It also ranks among the top 10 in generative AI writing tools. And Perry joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Fabulous. Cristian, if you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited to learn all about your work with Undetectable AI. Great to be with you this afternoon, my friend. And thank you so very much for being here.
Sure, great to be here. Yeah, a little bit of background about myself. Before starting Undetectable AI, I started a company called ChatterQuant in the financial technology space. Worked on that one for about a year and a half. We raised venture capital, and that was acquired by one of our customers in New York called Money.net. From there, hop straight into Undetectable AI. We've been growing very rapidly. We're up to about 55 employees, and the rest is kind of history. It's been an exciting space to be in and in an exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Christian, tell me about undetectable AI, my friend. I know it's all about helping people make their writing more human-centered, my friend. So, tell me about the platform and the company and how it's grown, my friend.
Sure. So we started it in 2023. Really focused on, did not raise venture capital, really focused on organic marketing and organic growth, heavily reinvesting back into that growth to grow it as quickly as possible. AI has become a very hot but also competitive space, and so we do feel like that reinvestment is necessary to continue on our current trajectory. Just past 15 million users. We take AI generated content and make it more human. And as you mentioned, and what does that mean? What that means is when you create something by ChatGPT, it will create a predictable output. AI generated outputs by LLMs are by definition predictable. That's how they're designed, is to essentially it's essentially taking training data and putting out a predictable output. If we're just keeping it simple like that, there's something called AI detectors that will be able to identify this large language model generated text. And what undetectable AI will do is make it more human, and the result of that is this essentially makes it undetectable by these AI detectors. Who uses undetectable AI? Our primary demographic would be marketing firms, agencies, and media companies that are putting out content at scale to who don't want to be penalized for using AI. We're strong believers that AI is the future, and I think most people are on board with that. But there's a lot of macro trends that are really cracking down on AI use. For instance, Google will penalize your website if you're putting out too much AI content or AI content at scale. It kind of goes against their spam policy. There is YouTube, which is taking down AI generated scripts or demonetizing AI generated script videos. We also have email providers that are using AI detection as one of the metrics to determine whether to put something in the spam folder. And Amazon, for instance, doesn't allow AI generated ebooks. So we have, really had the wind in our sails in terms of our growth.
Yeah, Christian, can I ask you about how this is really helping college and high school students get through their academic sort of journey in life, my friend? Because at some point they're going to have to write papers and turn in assignments. So I'm wondering the amount of impact you're making in the educational space as well. What would be your thoughts there, my friend?
Sure. So that is not our primary demographic. That's not who we're trying to target with our product as college students. I do believe there's some use of our product in that space, though we very much do not condone our products for the use of academic misconduct. Have some things in place that try and prevent people to use the tool for cheating. But we have a lot of very legitimate use cases. We have a lot of research being done with our tool, number one. And then number two, we have a lot of students that come to us who have academic accommodations. Essentially, they're accommodated and are allowed to use AI for certain parts of their class, whether they have dyslexia or dysgraphia, things like that. And they will, but some of the professors are not on board or don't love the idea of the student using AI, even with those kind of legally supported accommodations. And so we have a lot of people using it for that. And then the strange thing is kind of the whole AI detector space. We even have people who are humanizing their handwritten content in order to avoid getting their legitimately written essay flagged as AI in schools, which is something that really shouldn't be a thing if you ask me or anybody on our team. If if you write something by hand, that should be recognized, but these AI detectors are imperfect. And so we do have a lot of users that will come and actually humanize AI generated content to avoid the ramifications of AI detection.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, I'm also curious to ask you about, the authentic nature of making, human writing patterns seem more authentic, my friend. I know that the platform has a lot of different variations and nuances that detect inconsistencies in writing and help a lot of people make their writing more human-centered. So let's dive into exactly what that means and what you're hoping to accomplish in that realm through the platform and the company, my friend.
Yeah, so is your question how AI detection works and how we're kind of leaning into AI detection, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, in terms of making writing sort of more human-centered and also using AI as sort of a competitive advantage when you write text. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I truly believe that if a company is not using AI or at least adopting or looking at ways to adopt AI into their current workflows, that they're going to be left behind. It's undeniable how impactful AI has been in business. You see a lot of companies laying off programmers. They don't need as many programmers because of the help of AI, and one person is able to accomplish a lot more. We see that continuing to happen. We see that shift towards AI adoption to actually increase in speed and increase the amount of productivity a single individual is able to have over time. This is going to impact different professions a lot more quickly than it is others. For instance, programmers is one that is very quickly adopting, and we've been having conversations with different universities, and it's been really interesting to see that programmers, which for the longest time people have been saying, hey, if you want to make money, if you want something that's very secure, you should go into programming or learning how to program. And that's actually been one of the hardest jobs right now at this time for universities or different kind of charter schools, for instance, to place as programmers. They're not having trouble placing media people. They're not having trouble placing engineers. They're having trouble placing programmers. And I think you're going to see that expand outside of just kind of programming and writing. We've obviously seen it in writing and journalism. Their output has increased and people have become a lot more efficient because they're able to use AI to supplement their workflow. But I do think we're going to start seeing that a lot more spill over into engineering and some of these other more technical skills, which was the opposite of where people thought automation and robotics were going to go at the beginning. At the very beginning, people thought self-driving, truck drivers, things like that we're going to be the first to be replaced if we look, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But it's actually been a lot more of that white collar work.
Yeah, and Kristen, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this recent survey from Statista, my friend, that found that in 2023, authors who used AI in their work stood at about 23%, and of that 23%, 47% utilized AI as a grammar tool, and 29% of authors used it to brainstorm ideas. So, how do you think the book writing space will be transformed by AI? And what are your thoughts on those numbers, my friend?
It's actually really interesting that you bring that up. There are lots of different kind of AI book writing softwares out there. There's actually some companies that are doing that, and it really depends, right? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are people that are trying to crack down on that a little bit or don't think that's the way that writing a book should go. For instance, as I brought up, Amazon's cracking down on and doesn't allow AI generated ebooks to be listed on their store. right? So I think you're going to continue to see the shift towards that. I mean, it makes a ton of sense in terms of productivity from a writer's perspective. Why would you not use AI to help? If you get writer's block, you can kind of ping it and say, hey, what are some suggestions in terms of where I could go with the next page of this book or the next section of this book? But I do also think that for certain platforms, we actually have people who do AI generated ebooks and AI generated books that use our platform because of this. And so I think you're going to continue to see these providers and publishers cracking down on that content because of just the sheer volume of content that's now able to be made using these large language models.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, I'm also curious to ask you, how do you think the advancements of AI and your platform specifically can help us really accomplish everyday writing tasks more efficiently and everyday tasks efficiently? Because, throughout the course of our day, we write for a variety of different reasons. So how do you think AI and undetectable AI can help make everyday life more efficient, my friend?
Yeah, so we've really focused on how do we help people be more productive with real life use cases. I think there's a lot of AI development that's going on right now that isn't helping people with the problems that they're feeling right now, or doesn't really have a super focused way that they're going to monetize the product moving forward. They're just throwing a lot at the wall and kind of trying to figure out what sticks. We're really leaning into what are problems people are dealing with right now. And one of those being the job market, as we discussed. We think that's going to continue to be disrupted. There's currently a lot of AI products out there for employers to essentially be able to more efficiently screen applicants that are going towards their signing up to apply for their jobs. But there really isn't anything that's applicant facing that we feel serves some of the problems that applicants are facing every single day, which, for instance, one of our jobs right now that we're launching is an auto job applier. And this is going to help people apply to jobs at scale, follow ATS tracking, because that's a pretty which is applicant tracking system. And it's essentially something that these employers are using to determine whether they even look at a resume. They get thousands of applications, and a lot of times people don't even hear back from employers anymore when applying to jobs, or will apply to hundreds of jobs and not get any contacts, right? And these are perfectly able people with perfectly good resumes. They're just, it's become a numbers game, unfortunately, when applying for jobs. And so we're really leaning into, we see that as a problem. How do we solve that problem for people? And this tool applies to hundreds or thousands of jobs on an applicant's behalf and uses AI to kind of customize that CV, cover letter, resume, all of that to the job that they're applying for, and then allow them to really get a leg up when applying to those jobs. But we try to take that approach of how do we solve a real problem for people right now when building any of our products. And so we hope and plan to continue to ship products like that. Our humanizer, we're leaning into a lot of different things, not just, hey, how do I basically humanize which is a pretty complex problem to solve, but not just, hey, how do I basically, with a universal kind of humanization layer, humanize my content, but leaning into how do we match the authorship. So if I wanted to write like you, Kevin, I could put in a couple of pieces that you've written, and then anything that's generated by that is going to sound like it was written by you while also still being humanized and undetectable. And so how do we really lean into allowing people to adopt this to match their voice and not just turn the whole world into a completely ChatGPT sounding textual world, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, I'm also curious to ask you about how you hope this platform makes people better writers. What do you think you're hoping that people gain that they can add to their writing to make them more efficient writers? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's It's more about allowing people to use the amazing tools that have been created in the last few years, but without worrying about the negative ramifications that come with that, right? We're not necessarily trying to out the gate. We have some great stuff that we're developing with our machine learning team, but we're not necessarily trying to replace somebody's ability to choose the initial provider that they want to use, right? And so if you still want to use ChatGPT or you prefer Perplexity or something like that, we are allowing you to use that and then essentially be able to actually use it for what you intended, such as blogs or emails or things like that without the negative repercussions. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we're trying to make them more efficient. I would say that we're trying to protect them from the potential negative ramifications of being more efficient, which we're seeing out there.
Yeah, so let's talk about those things that you're trying to protect them from. You know, a lot of people use ChatGPT, as you mentioned, and a lot of people use AI to make writing tasks more seamless, as you mentioned before. So, what are some of the things that you're seeing out in the market that you're hoping this platform will protect people from?
Yeah, as I said, we have people that reach out to us who completely hand wrote their piece of content, whether it's an essay or a project that they then submitted into into their school, and their school comes back and says, "Hey, you just got flagged as this being AI generated. If it happens again, you know, we're suspending you or you're on probation, you're failing this class." So even with handwritten content, that is a risk that we're seeing people come to use our product because of. And that doesn't just apply to education, as we brought up, but applies to freelancers. There's a lot of freelancers and marketing agencies. We hear the same story from marketing agencies that come to us and will say, "Hey, we've been using AI to serve our user base for years," right? They've been maybe using an old version of some of these open source models like Hugging Face, etc., and there hasn't been any problems. We submit reports, etc., but they'll have clients that come back and check it for AI and say, "Hey, I'm not paying because you did all of this with AI." Doesn't affect the end result of what they're providing to their client, but their client feels slighted or that they haven't received what they paid for by essentially getting an AI output. And so there's still a stigma around AI generated content, especially when it comes to some business use cases. You see all over SEO, like Reddit boards, etc., people saying, "Hey, or even Twitter, people saying, 'Hey, I just received something that had an AI generated summary report from this person that I'm paying a lot of money to. What should I do, or how do I get around paying them because I don't feel like my contract has been filled,' even though, again, they might not even necessarily be serving anything public facing."
Yeah, you know, I'm also curious to get your thoughts on this report that was published last year from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, my friend, and it found that more than 51% of young people between the ages of 14 and 22 have reported using generative AI at some point in their life, but only 4% claim that they use it daily. And they also found that the most common use of AI-generated tools came from um, collecting information, at a clip of 53%, and others used it at a clip of 51% for brainstorming ideas. And then finally, notably, the report says that Black and Latino millennials are most common to use AI tools for those reasons, my friend. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on those findings? And are you surprised at all that more young people don't use AI today, my friend?
I think you're going to start seeing that adoption rise, and I think it's continuing to rise and will continue to rise very quickly. As with any new technology or new product, it can take a while for everybody to start using it. There's different demographics that will use it a little more quickly than others. It does surprise me a little bit, those numbers that it's so low. But I think we're just going to continue to see that adoption go up. If we look at search terms and search trends for different AI tools over time, it really is up and to the right. And so it's steady and continuing to grow. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. I just think it might take a little bit longer for some demographics to pick that up than others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, my friend, that you manage a group of people are running this company. And I'm curious to know, what do you think is the best lesson you've learned about managing people with empathy and compassion while also allowing them to remain productive and as they feel a part of this company and its growth, my friend? So what do you think is the key to managing people with empathy and compassion? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's super important. If people on your team don't feel valued, you're not going to get the best output from them, and they're also likely to churn and go find a different job. And so it's super important to make people feel heard and valued throughout their time working for you. Another thing that I think is so important is making sure that, number one, you surround yourself with people who are able to do something that you're not able to do. So if they're great at, for instance, my background is not in programming. And so I try and find people who really excel in that area. We make sure to recognize their work and be supportive of the things that they need and recognize their accomplishments as they happen. Additionally, placing people in the right spot is incredibly important. If you're interviewing and you find somebody who's absolutely great, but place them in the wrong position, it's setting everybody up for failure. And that's something that I kind of had to learn early on, is I'd find a really great candidate who fit really well over here, but maybe where we needed the help right now, they weren't as great of a fit. But you go, oh, this person's very smart, I'm sure they'll figure it out. And we have not found that to be very effective. You need to find the right person for the right role when you're hiring it, and really also allowing people to share ideas. Super important in terms of retention, in terms of making people feel valued, and recognizing those ideas when they're good ideas. And we allow our employees to operate with a lot of autonomy. We find that to be super important as well. We want to find somebody who's not just going to follow, quote unquote, orders. We try to find people who we're going to allow them to take the reins of their department or their area of expertise and really listen when they say, hey, this is where we think we should go with this department or direction here. We obviously do have a typical structure of CEO, COO, but I am not telling each of our department where to go all the time. We really try to give them the autonomy and recognize that they are experts in their field. And that goes a long way for making them feel valued as well as
Yeah,
company success.
yeah, absolutely. And I know two things that are important to you, my friend, are efficient product execution and providing a great customer service. And tell me that you think those are two pillars to achieving success. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about that, my friend.
Yeah, customer support's incredibly important for a whole bunch of reasons. If there's that saying that if somebody has a negative experience, they'll tell 10 people. If somebody has a positive experience, they might tell no one or one, right? And so really trying to minimize the amount of negative experiences that people have on your product, especially as you scale, is super important. Towards the beginning, when you're really small and you're just trying to hit as many eyeballs as possible, it may not be as big of a deal. But somebody talking negatively about your product can influence tens, or if they, put out a review or a video, hundreds of people. And so it's really important to make sure that that customer feels valued. And even if they have a negative experience with your product, that you try and rectify that in any way that you're possibly able. We're very open to working with anybody, no matter how large of a client or small of a client, to try and make them, even if they have a negative experience with any of our products, to make them feel good walking away from their interaction with us.
Yeah, Cristian, what do you think is the most valuable lesson you've learned about yourself as a leader as you continue to grow this company to higher heights, my friend? What have you most learned about yourself?
Yeah, I think for myself, it took me a little bit of a while to get to what we talked about earlier, which is feeling comfortable handing the reins over to somebody else. It's really hard with a startup or any business or kind of any project that you're working on to say, hey, yeah, I trust you completely to make these decisions that could be very positive or, the scary part, very negative for our company and our product. And so if you surround yourself with the right team, I think it's really a focus on team. If you surround yourself with the right team, you're able to be successful, offload a lot off your plate, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to run a large company just yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cristian, I don't know how much research you did on me before this interview, my friend, but I was born with cerebral palsy, and for years, my friend, was in speech therapy because, as a result of my disability, sometimes my words don't always catch up to how fast my brain is thinking of them. So, I use AI generated tools sometimes to help with writing and making my communication more effective and clear and all of that good stuff. So I'm curious, how do you think AI and your platform specifically can help people with disabilities become better communicators? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Absolutely. So that was something that we prioritized very early on our website. We actually have an accessibility button at the bottom of the website for people with visual impairments, things like that. But going back to what we talked about earlier in terms of some of our educational use cases, is there's still a stigma around AI. And what we're hoping to do with our humanizer is allow anybody to essentially go and use this product to humanize their AI content without facing those disadvantages of using AI, right? Putting somebody on level footing with somebody who might write out that email if they do have a disability or impairment that makes it a little bit harder for them to write in the same way other people would.
Yeah, and my friend, I'm curious, why is this work uh, personally important to you? Why is this work your passion and purpose individually, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit of a hard time growing up through school. I have something called dysgraphia, which essentially similar kind of disruptions between when I'm trying to write something down, what I write down versus what I'm thinking. And so I felt that firsthand. When I was younger, I was had an accommodation to use a computer in class. And that was great. It was very helpful for my academic success, but it was difficult, right? Where everybody else was required to write on pen and paper, and I would pull out a computer. I felt a little bit ostracized. Same thing if somebody's writing something with AI in a situation where they feel maybe that isn't as appropriate, but it is appropriate to kind of help put them on a level playing field. We don't think people should feel bad or be stigmatized or be penalized for that, if that makes sense, right? If I'm composing an email and I use ChatGPT and I'm worried that this is detectable, or the employer that I'm applying to is going to AI check, which a lot of employers are doing, that's just not fair for that end user who's at a disadvantage to not be able to use AI for a reasonable accommodation.
And Christian, I know that you do some public speaking as well, my friend. So I'm also curious to ask you about the conversations you're having with industry professionals or people who lead organizations about the future of AI and how it can make their lives more efficient. And where do you think you see the future of AI as an industry going, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we hear from all businesses in terms of kind of what they're trying to accomplish with AI is how do they reduce costs? That's a huge, obviously it's a business, they're focused on profitability. So how do they reduce costs without necessarily reducing um, user satisfaction or customer satisfaction? Some of the AI, I can find or say that I personally experienced some frustrations when reaching out to certain AI customer support agents, right? You can tell it's AI, they don't understand the question, they're not able to solve it. And so that is really some of the concerns that a lot of these businesses have in terms of adopting is AIs. How do they continue to make their user experience great, customer satisfaction, keep that high while reducing the costs and or improving productivity and efficiency. Same thing with some of these AI sales development representatives. It might be reaching out and saying something that's not on brand with your messaging. And so there's some risk to adopting these products, and that's probably the pushback that we're hearing from businesses right now that's preventing adoption in as quick of a manner as it might otherwise. But I think it's to be expected with kind of the age of this whole industry, it not being, at least in its current form, it not being very old, right? It's only a few years old, and that'll continue to, those concerns are going to continue to be solved with all of the new products that are being developed right now.
Yeah, and for yourself as a speaker, my friend, what do you think are the keys to delivering an effective message that sticks with the audience? I'm curious to ask you about any advice you have for aspiring speakers about delivering a concise but effective message. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think for most people, preparation is so important, right? But even with some of these AI tools, I use them whenever I'm doing speaking. I will use an AI tool to say, hey, how might an audience receive what I'm trying to say here? And I'll get a lot of great points from things like ChatGPT that will say, oh, this might not have enough evidence to back it up. You should add more evidence to what you're talking about, or particular case studies, etc., to make your point more effectively. Um, Additionally, practice. It's public speaking. You just need to practice and practice and practice. And the more you do it, the less nervous you'll get, the less stutters you'll have, the easier it becomes over time. You realize everything's going to be okay. And I would say those are probably the two biggest points.
Yeah, and I have two questions left. And the first one has to do with creating sort of what I call an inclusive future that, I started this podcast almost 5 years ago now, and I wanted to create more bridges of what I call a unity, bringing people closer together. So how do you think we can create a more inclusive future while also breaking down barriers to entry, whether it be from a personal, social recreation or professional standpoint? What are your thoughts there?
That's a great question, and I think it's such an important problem that needs to be solved as we're seeing kind of in terms of socializing has changed dramatically in the last 20, 30 years with the advance of the internet here and the ability to, when people talk about socializing now, they don't even aren't necessarily talking about going to the mall and walking around. They're talking about hopping on a video game and chatting with people online. They're talking about texting or messaging on Instagram. And so from a social perspective, I think it's incredibly important for us to continue working on that or finding ways that we keep people social. In terms of inclusivity, it's as you said, I think a lot of these products and productivity hacks that are coming out right now, ChatGPT is great, but you need to know how to prompt it well, right? And if you don't have the background or the kind of experience, knowledge, or education to properly prompt AI, you're going to be a lot less effective at doing it. And so it's making sure that there are free mediums, I think, for people to be able to learn to adopt this kind of technology in a way that's not only available to people who can afford a college education. For instance, the college nearby where I am now has, included in their curriculum, ChatGPT, prompting courses, things like that. And so in order to make this technology more inclusive, we really have to make sure that anybody is able to go and learn about these kinds of products. I think we do see that a little bit on YouTube. There's a lot of resources there. There are, I see on LinkedIn all of the time a lot of free resources. I can send some of those over if you think those are helpful to share. But of how anybody without having to pay is able to go in and be able to learn how to use some of this newer technology to give them, a leg up in the workforce as they're trying to apply. And as long as everybody has access to that, I think, that keeps things inclusive, as you've brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, my final question for you has to do with your personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want your legacy to be defined. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't have as much personal work-life balance as I might want right now. It's running a startup, especially one that's growing, with as many people that we have. My life is very heavily skewed towards work and a lot less towards, the life balance of that work-life balance equation. I really hope to be able to entrepreneurship is what I've been working on since I was very young. I started my first business with 2 employees when I was 13 years old. And I believe that's the way I'm going to be able to impact the most people. And so with that, I want to, be able to touch and improve the lives of as many people as possible from a professional perspective. And from a personal perspective, I want to have had a lot of quality time with friends, family, and for them to, look at me and say that I treated people well, I think is really important to me. That's the legacy I'd like to leave behind.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And finally, tell me if people want to get connected with Undetectable AI or yourself personally, what's the best way they can do that?
Perfect. So I have a LinkedIn. People, I leave that open. I allow messaging from anybody through my LinkedIn. That's a great way to do that. That's Cristian Perry of Undetectable AI. Additionally, if somebody wants to be involved in working with Undetectable AI, the best way to do that would be contact@undetectable.ai. And those will be, they're all read by people. We look at everything. And so love to hear from anybody listening.
Fabulous. And, I'm going to sneak in one more question before I say goodbye, my friend. How do you think we can make sure that we can use AI as a competitive advantage, but also not lose the human element of communicating? What are your thoughts there?
I think there's a lot that for quite a while is going to need to be solved by people. For instance, high enterprise sales, I think, are going to continue to be led by individuals. People want, I truly do believe that people want interaction and have a lot more trust speaking with an individual than they do with an AI. And so I don't think we're going to completely lose that, or at least not too quickly. But also, I guess it just goes back to balance. If people are able to balance where they implement AI, that's what's going to keep connection and AI separate. But that's a really tough question because we are continuing, even before AI, to see a lot of human connection being lost.
Well, absolutely, my friend. And Cristian, I want to thank you for being here and being open to answering my questions and for engaging in conversation, my friend. You're really an inspiring person with a terrific story, my friend, and I feel privileged enough that you found merit to share it with me this afternoon, my friend. I want to wish you the best of luck in your current and future endeavors, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Great. Really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak on here. And I hope you have a amazing week.